So, you've just finished KVK 1 and you're starting to think about KVK 2. Which commanders might you want to run and which might you want to avoid? Well, join me to find out. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Shappy Gaming, and I am a Rise of Kingdoms content creator here to help you build the best account that you possibly can have in Rise of Kingdoms. If you missed our previous video where we walked through all the different commanders that you might want to work on for KVK 1, be sure to check that out on the top right side of your screen now. And if you came from that video, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the different commanders you might want to invest in KVK 2 and why you might want to be starting to save up some heads for those KVK 3 commanders instead. So let's get into it and hop over to our KVK 2 account to talk about which commanders are you going to want to work on. We have made it to our KVK 2 account. As you can see, I created this account in Kingdom 3334, which is currently in KVK 2, as you can see here. Now, let's talk about how KVK 2 works. Typically, KVK 2 is going to show up roughly 130 days after the kingdom has been open. It does depend on when your KVK 1 pops, and it also depends upon when your matchmaking is. Now, KVK 2 is a really interesting KVK because there are only a few commanders that actually got unlocked between KVK 1 and KVK 2. And looking at this kingdom specifically, you can imagine that a lot of the different players here are probably not going to be super powerful because this is still a very young kingdom. Now, that said, let's take a look and see exactly what this alliance even looks like here. As you can see, a max power of 4 billion, which is not terribly much. You do have a couple of T5 players at this point, but not terribly many. So let's look at which commanders are actually going to be available for you. So unlike KVK 1, you do have some new commanders that became available. For example, you do have Alex. Alex is one of the greatest commanders that has ever entered Rise of Kingdoms. Unfortunately, he's not as good in the end game as he used to be. However, I do see a lot of people still running Luce Alex as a 5th march, which is a very powerful infantry march. So Alex might be a good investment. We'll be talking about that. Now, you also have access to Edward of Woodstock, who I would absolutely recommend that you skip. We also have Tamiris, we have Wu, and I believe that should be about it for our new legendary commanders. Now, there is one other commander who showed up in KVK 1, but you may not have invested in him just yet, and that is YSG, Yisongai. And he is going to be quintessential as we start thinking about which commanders you want to start investing in and why. Now, let's talk a little bit about that. If you guys missed the previous video, then you should need to know that you only need to get the commander that you're investing in to level 60 if he's the primary commander. Now, YSG is typically never going to be the primary commander, so you actually only need to get him to level 40. Level 40 is what is typically required to get all of their skills unlocked, and then you can max them from there. That said, if you do some of the star hacks that you can see online, you can actually do it with only level 30. It just requires a little bit of luck and some more of the larger star bundles. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, I'm sure you're wondering, which commanders do I actually use? So let's actually start with Cavalry. Now, if you saw the previous video, you do remember Minamoto. Minamoto is still one of the greatest commanders at this point in the game. In KVK 2, you can be pairing Minamoto with Cao Cao and dealing amazing damage as a cavalry main. Now, you can also mix it up and you can run Minamoto with Saladin if you want, or Saladin with Minamoto, both of which are going to be a great pair. Realistically, Minamoto is super valuable and viable at this point, and if you have bought him already, he's going to be great for you. However, if you haven't bought him yet, it does become questionable as to whether he's going to be a good investment. Because, let's be honest, after you finish KVK 2, Minamoto becomes far less viable, especially since they've now brought in Season of Conquest commanders into KVK 3. So, at this point, it's really up to you and how comfortable you are spending, but Minamoto with Cao Cao or with Saladin is a viable pair in KVK 2, and as a cavalry main, I would probably choose to run that. Now, if you don't want to spend on Minamoto, there are other options. In fact, Saladin is now available, and I typically would say don't compete in MGE. However, Saladin is a very viable commander early in the game. He's even useful into the late game. Now, one thing you want to remember with Saladin is you do not need to max him. And if you recall, it's about 690 gold heads to max a legendary commander. But with Saladin, you only need to get him to 5551. You can pretty much skip this last skill because you won't be using him to rally cities. If you do that, it's only around 300 heads of investment, and personally, I think he's worth it. I still use him occasionally in the late game. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is if you don't want to actually go through and compete for MGE, you can get Saladin from the daily bundles, and to be honest, that's probably your best bet. I would encourage that over going and trying to spend all of your resources and gems on Mighty's Governor event. Now, who can you actually put Saladin with? You can put Saladin with most of the cavalry commanders, so typically I would say use him with who you have maxed already. If you have Minamoto, you can pair them, or if you have Cao Cao maxed, Saladin with Cao Cao is a very quick march that is actually really good, especially considering that you don't want to buy Minamoto. That's a good pairing. Now, another pair that I've seen very often is actually going to be Saladin with Baibars, because Saladin has great skills and deals a lot of damage, and he also has that healing reduction, which again makes you viable against Richards. But Baibars has that AoE skill, which also helps you run away really quickly, and you do need that with Saladin because his march speed bonus is only about 5%, which is not as good as one might typically want. I would probably not say with Belisarius. That's just my recommendation. I would put him with Baibars. That's just my take. Now, we've covered cavalry. Who would you invest in for infantry? Well, for infantry, your options get really interesting because previously you've probably invested in Pyrrhus. Pyrrhus is probably still going to be viable at this point in the game, but again, he's not going to be a big late game commander that you're going to be using in Season of Conquest. Who I would actually recommend that you really invest in is going to be Alex. As I mentioned, Alex is going to be viable in the late game with Luce. He's probably going to continue to be relatively useful, especially if you're going to be an infantry main. Now, the advantages that Alex provides are really going to be the shield, as well as just the whole open field concept. If you're not a rally leader, even if you are, Alex is going to be very viable in the field. Don't garrison with him, but use him in the field. As you can see, he's got massive march speed bonus, big attack bonus. He's got a shield. He plays off of his shield. He's really going to be a practical commander. If you have maxed Pyrrhus, you can run Alex with Pyrrhus to have a pretty nice pair. Pyrrhus does, I believe, have the health, which Alex would totally benefit from. So you could use them. You could also use Alex with Constantine if you're a whale. Typically, I recommend against investing in Constantine if you're a free-to-play, but that's just my take. Now, who can you really put with Alex to be terribly effective? And this one's going to surprise you because Alex, as I said earlier, is an infantry commander. But one of the best pairs that we've seen for Alex in the game is going to be YSG. And the reason for this is that YSG has this circular AoE, which makes him extraordinarily viable in the field. YSG also has this buff to skill damage, which Alex really needs. So if you do run Alex with YSG, you will deal a lot of damage. You won't be tanky. So if you're running this, I recommend that this is run amongst other marches. Do not run just Alex YSG. But this march is also going to be really useful when we start thinking about actual combat with murder balls and such. Definitely a pair to consider. Now, if you are a purist and you want to be running only infantry with your infantry march, understandably, you can actually run Alex with Martell because the combination of these two is extraordinarily tanky. Martell has the shield, and Alex does play off the shield as well. But not only that, when you do have your shield up, you actually get a bonus to your damage dealt, which again is really, really valuable when you have him paired with Alex, who needs that buff. Now, you also get the counterattack damage buffs from Martell, which helps to strengthen your Alex in the field. So if you're getting swarmed in the early game, Alex Martell is probably going to be the best pair for you, and you can switch that up as well. You can run Martell primary if you want to. It really doesn't make much difference for this particular march. Also, Martell is going to be a gold key commander, and at this point in the game, you probably have your gold key commanders fairly far along, so it's a fairly cheap investment. Now, if you're wondering who do we garrison with, Martell with Constantine is actually one of the best early game garrisons for KVK, and Alex YSG is a great rally. I've also seen Saladin YSG as a rally for early game. Don't ask me why. YSG is just incredibly overpowered in the early game, but again, just a pair to keep in mind for garrisoning. Now, last but not least, and this is going to be very disappointing to a lot of people, I expect, archers are not going to be the best in this stage of the game. I would absolutely recommend against Edward of Woodstock, and here's why. His rage cost is ridiculously high, making it so that he's actually not popping off a lot of skill damage until he gets all of that rage. But if you're fighting against someone else, the amount of troops that you have at this point is going to be way less than what you could have been when you were firing off your skills, and he is not viable even in the mid game. I would skip him. Toyis is interesting. If you're an archer primary, you might want to consider her just because of the poison stack. But if you're not running more than 3 marches, Toyis is going to become a lot less valuable to you because that poison really amplifies the skill damage of your other marches. If you have one pair that you can run for archers, here's what I would say. I would run Tutmos with YSG as the best legendary combo that you can, because YSG is not a very good primary, and Tutmos is actually very viable. And if you've already watched my KVK1 video, you've probably already invested in him already. You also get a lot of AoE damage between the two of these, and I expect that they're probably still going to be viable even into KVK3 and potentially in KVK4, though honestly at that point you might start phasing out Tutmos for some of the other meta commanders. I hope that this has been helpful. If it has, do hit that subscribe button right over there, bottom right hand corner, and hit the bell so you get notified when new episodes come out. Be sure to share this video with your friends and drop a like. Thank you all. Chappy out.